I still remember the day I first saw the messages, the ones that changed my entire world, the ones that made my heart pound so violently I thought it might break through my ribcage. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of the small locker room, I was miles away from home in the midst of my grueling physical training cycle. Sweat was still dripping from my forehead, my hair plastered to my temples, and the fatigue in my thighs felt like fire. Yet none of that discomfort could compare to the cold dread that spread through my veins when I read those words. They started so innocently. "Hey, Carmen, can you pick up some milk on your way home?" I forgot to grab it. A simple message that might not have meant anything if not for the fact that it was written by my husband, Mark, and ended with, "Since you're staying over again tonight, I figure it makes sense." I stared, my eyes darting over the rest of the conversation. The conversation logs were full of inside jokes, half flirtatious banter, and talk of Carmen making breakfast, tidying up, even reorganizing the pantry. It was a running commentary of domestic life, a life that, by the looks of it, I was no longer part of. My training kept me away from home for weeks at a time. As a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I had no choice but to commit fully, mentally and physically. Mark had supported me at first, hugging me tight before my departure, whispering that he was proud of me. But reading these messages, it became apparent how quickly everything could change. In Mark's words, it was practical for Carmen, his coworker, to stay with him. He claimed he didn't want to be lonely or worried about random intruders in the night. She was, as he put it, safer company, because apparently she would watch the place while I was gone. But as I read message after message, full of warmth that should have been reserved for me, I realized something else was going on. This was not just a matter of convenience. They were living like a couple. I wanted to scream at the phone, to throw it across the room. Instead, I quietly finished dressing, my training uniform replaced by a plain t-shirt and jeans. I boarded the bus back to the barracks with a knot in my stomach. I had 3 more weeks of this intense program. And the worst part was, I could do nothing about the situation from hundreds of miles away. Confronting him over the phone would only create an argument that might sabotage my performance. And if I left the training to fix my personal life, I'd lose the opportunity for which I had worked so hard. So I kept silent, fuming, biting my tongue, and pushing forward with my routines as though my life hadn't just been upended. When those 3 weeks finally ended, I didn't text Mark to say I was coming home. I decided to surprise him, though. By now, the only surprise would be how bold they might have become. The ride home felt unbearably long, every minute stretching out. My mind spun with possible scenarios. Maybe Carmen truly was just a friend who had nowhere else to stay. Maybe Mark had made a poor but ultimately innocent choice, blinded by a desire for companionship while I was gone. But the messages told a different story, one filled with endearments, domestic routines, and intimacy. I couldn't ignore. At last, I arrived at our doorstep, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. My key fit into the lock just fine, but I paused, heart pounding. The hallway light was on. I could see 2 sets of shoes at the entryway, Mark's loafers, and a pair of white sneakers too small to be his. Feeling a swirl of anger, I quietly opened the door. Inside, my world tilted even more sharply. Carmen was in the kitchen, rummaging through the cabinets, humming a soft tune. She wore Mark's old t-shirt, one I recognized because I had gifted it to him on a whim years ago. The smell of toasted bread lingered in the air. She didn't hear me at first, and for a second I simply watched her. A stranger in my home wearing my husband's clothes, preparing a meal like this was her domain. Then Mark's voice came from the living room. "Carm? You find the peanut butter?" Carm. My husband had a nickname for her. Just like that, I felt the dam of my self-control cracking. Before I could stop myself, I cleared my throat loudly. Carmen jumped, nearly dropping a jar of jam. Mark emerged, wearing sweatpants and a casual grin, which slid off his face the instant he saw me. In that moment, I witnessed a flicker of guilt, panic, and something else, perhaps fear. "Hey," he managed, trying to muster a casual tone. "You're home early." I dropped my duffel bag by the door, allowing its thud to echo through the awkward silence. I looked at Carmen, then at Mark. Every breath felt heavy, every muscle in my body tense from both my training and this emotional battle. Yes, I am, I answered, letting the tension crackle in the air. Carmen fidgeted, not meeting my eyes. She put the jar of jam down, then mumbled something about giving us space, disappearing down the hallway, my hallway to the guest room. I noticed some changes around the house in a matter of seconds. A pink sweater draped over the arm of our sofa, an unfamiliar magazine on the coffee table, new decorations in the living room that I had never seen before. The entire place felt different, lived in a way that did not reflect my presence. Look, Mark started, raising his palms. Before you say anything, I want to explain. I inhaled, forcing myself to remain calm. The last thing I wanted was to break down sobbing or start screaming. Go ahead, I said, though my voice trembled. He took a breath, then launched into an explanation about how he missed me, how the house felt empty without me, how Carmen had a tough situation at her old apartment. Something about a leak, mold, and how she needed a place to crash temporarily. It just worked out, he added, looking anywhere but at me. It's safer for me, it's safer for her, and I didn't think you'd mind. You didn't think I'd mind. I repeated each word slowly, struggling to keep my composure. This is my home too, Mark. Our home. He raked a hand through his hair, looking genuinely frazzled now. I didn't think it would be a big deal, he insisted, clearly grasping at excuses. She's just a friend, I swear. Nothing happened. My eyes wandered to the half-finished breakfast, the sense of intimacy in the house. Right, I replied, jaw set. She's just a friend who sleeps over every night and shops for groceries and reorganizes everything like she owns the place. I let out a bitter laugh. How convenient. Mark had no answer for that, and I, feeling a rush of anger and betrayal, stormed past him into our bedroom, only to discover my personal space was barely recognizable. Clothes, not mine, filled half the closet. Pillows, not mine, decorated the bed. It was a punch to the gut to realize that my husband had systematically given away pieces of our life, of my life, to this woman. I could have unleashed my fury right then, but a creeping sense of self-preservation told me to take a breath, to think logically. So I pulled out my phone, took pictures of everything: her clothes in my closet, her toiletries in my bathroom, her personal items scattered across my dresser. Each snap felt like one more piece of evidence, one more reason to confirm that this was not some harmless arrangement. Then I turned on my heel, walked out of the bedroom, and looked my husband in the eye. We need to talk. Carmen stayed hidden in the guest room while Mark attempted to justify everything again, sounding more and more defensive. He claimed it was all about convenience, that he was lonely, that they didn't want to upset me, that he truly believed I would be okay with it once he explained. I told Carmen you'd be cool, he said, eyes darting, searching my face for mercy. You're always so understanding. Am I? I murmured quietly, voice shaking with anger. Well, I'm done being understanding. She needs to leave. Now. Mark's eyes widened. He started to protest, but saw the resolute look in my eyes. He must have sensed the boundaries he had crossed were more than a mere mistake. After a moment of tense silence, he knocked on the guest room door. Carmen emerged, face pale, bags under her eyes. I saw her glance at my packed duffel bag at the entrance, at my expression that likely spelled out war. Within half an hour, she gathered her own belongings and rushed out, offering a shaky apology that I couldn't even stand to acknowledge. With that, she was gone, and I was left to confront my husband and the wreckage of our marriage. Once Carmen left, the house fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic outside. I collapsed onto the couch, so exhausted I could hardly see straight, my body still aching from training. Mark sat in the armchair opposite me, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, I found my voice. What were you thinking? He sighed, massaging his temples. I wasn't. Not really, he admitted. I missed you, yes, but also, We got along really well, Carm and I. We had fun, we played board games, we cooked together. It felt so natural. Natural, I repeated, letting the bitterness linger in my voice. My heart felt raw. So natural that you replaced me in my own life with another woman. You made me into an afterthought. My eyes began to sting with tears I refused to release. Did it cross your mind that maybe I'd come home and feel like I don't belong anymore? His face fell, the weight of my words evidently hitting him. I'm sorry, he whispered, but it felt hollow. I'd heard that phrase so many times throughout our years together for arguments, for small slights. This time was different. This was a betrayal of trust, a betrayal of space, a betrayal of everything I thought we had. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that I was leaving for a while to clear my head. I grabbed some of my personal items, not wanting to stay in that tainted space. My best friend, Kelsey, lived downtown. She was a rock in my life, always ready to help, and I knew she wouldn't hesitate to let me crash on her couch. Mark made a small sound of protest, but even he recognized that my staying there would only prolong a vicious fight. Walking out of that house into the crisp afternoon air, I felt numb. The training cycle's physical exhaustion, and now this emotional bombshell had left me drained. But beneath that fatigue, a seed of anger and desire for retribution began to grow a quiet vow that I would not let him get away with humiliating me in my own home. I wasn't sure yet what form that revenge would take, but I knew I wasn't simply going to roll over and accept his apologies. Not this time. At Kelsey's place, a cozy two-bedroom loft, I let everything spill out in a rush of tears and words. She listened, eyes widening in shock when I told her about how Carmen had practically moved in, how my home was no longer mine, how Mark had acted so casual about it. Anger flared in her eyes as she pulled me into a hug. That's messed up, she muttered, a stark understatement compared to what she must have been thinking. Over the next few days, I oscillated between heartbreak and fury. I found it hard to sleep, kept picturing Carmen's face and Mark's guilty expression. I still had the evidence in my phone, the screenshots of their text conversations, the photos of her items scattered around. Part of me wanted to destroy Mark's reputation, to broadcast the texts everywhere, to shame him for humiliating me so thoroughly. Another part of me, the more rational side, urged caution revenge stories often end badly if you act in the heat of the moment. Better to plan carefully, better to protect myself, to be strategic. So I spent my time in Kelsey's spare room plotting out possibilities. Legally, Mark's actions might not be enough for a charge of infidelity if they never slept together. But was that really the point? They'd formed an emotional bond, one strong enough for him to break every vow he'd made to me. I felt certain something more had happened, though he swore up and down that it was just friendship. You gotta confront them, Kelsey told me one night, but do it smartly, and figure out what you want out of all this. She flicked her gaze to my phone. You have loads of proof he's overstepped. Even if he never physically cheated, he's basically replaced you. And that's not okay. If you want a divorce, you've got ammo. Divorce. The word cut through me. I'd never imagined my marriage might end this way, but neither had I imagined Mark could do something so brazen, so cruel. I tapped my nails against my phone. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. I do still care about him, but I can't ignore this. And I'm not sure if he's being honest about the extent of things. Carmen acted way too comfortable. Kelsey nodded, her eyes brimming with sympathy and a hint of matching anger. If you want the truth, maybe you should talk to Carmen. That idea stuck in my mind. Confronting Carmen could blow up in my face, but if I played it right, I might learn something. Mark wasn't telling me. If he was lying about being just friends, there would be signs. The next morning, Kelsey helped me track down Carmen's phone number. I had it in Mark's text logs, after all. My hand trembled slightly as I typed out a polite but firm message, requesting to meet her somewhere public. I half expected Carmen to ignore me, but within minutes, she replied with a surprisingly contrite message. I'm so sorry about everything. I'll meet you if that's what you want. I'll explain my side. We agreed to meet at a cafe near her office building. Ironically, the same place where Mark and I used to have Saturday brunch. I arrived early, wearing a plain black sweater and jeans, no makeup, hair tied back, wanting to appear calm and unwavering. My pulse thrummed in my ears as I waited. When Carmen entered, I recognized her immediately. Tall, brunette, dressed in a blouse and tailored pants that exuded professionalism. She spotted me, raised a tentative hand, and approached. We settled at a small table in the corner, away from prying ears. She seemed nervous, unable to meet my eyes at first. "I want to say sorry, truly," she began, fingers laced around the mug of coffee she'd ordered. "I never intended to come between you two." I let out a hollow laugh, ignoring the twisting knot in my stomach. "Well, you did, and here we are," she swallowed, nodding. "I know. Honestly, I only planned to stay a few nights at first. My apartment had issues, and Mark offered. Then I realized it was nice. We hung out, watched movies. He talked about you a lot, actually, saying how proud he was of you, how he missed you. But I guess," she trailed off, looking guilty. The lines blurred. I studied her expression, half waiting for her to spin some manipulative story, half wanting to punch a hole through the table. "Tell me the truth, Carmen. Did you and Mark sleep together?" Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. A beat passed, tense as a drawn bowstring. "No," she finally answered, voice trembling. "We never did. We got close. I won't lie, there were a couple of nights where I thought we might, but he said he couldn't. He said he loved you." That's the part that really messed with me, because I started developing feelings for him. I wanted him to tell me it was over with you, or that he was ready to move on, but he never did. A glimmer of relief flickered through me, but it was overshadowed by the deeper betrayal. Emotional affairs often cut just as deep, if not deeper, than physical ones. "So you acted like you were the lady of the house, cooking, cleaning, dressing in his shirts?" She blushed. "I guess I got caught up. I wanted that feeling of domesticity. I liked playing house. I liked being around him." She sighed. "I'm not proud of it. I should have left much sooner. He told me you were aware, that you'd given permission. I didn't fully believe it, but I wanted to believe him." I shook my head, bitterness swirling. "I never gave permission. If he told you that, he lied. But maybe you suspected that all along." I let the accusation hang. She nodded, a few tears rolling down her cheeks. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but my empathy was overshadowed by the memory of her wearing my clothes, entering my bedroom, rearranging my world without so much as a second thought. We talked a bit more, most of it retreading the same ground. She insisted she was sorry, that she'd never meant to take my place in a permanent sense. Yet, from her words, it was clear she'd harbored fantasies of Mark choosing her. And Mark, for his part, had enjoyed the attention, the comfort, and the emotional cushion she provided while I was gone. Before we parted ways, she reached into her purse and handed me a folder, explaining it was full of photos and receipts from her time there. "In case you need it," she said softly, avoiding eye contact. "For legal reasons or something else. I don't know. I want to show you I'm telling the truth." I took the folder, feeling a mix of gratitude and anger. "Fine," I muttered, standing up to leave. I paused, looking down at her. "I don't know if I believe everything you've said, but I guess, thanks for meeting me." She nodded, tears still glistening. "I know it means nothing now, but he does love you, and I'm sorry." With that, she slipped away into the bustle of the cafe, leaving me standing there, folder in hand, uncertain of my next steps. Back at Kelsey's loft, we laid out the folder contents on the coffee table. There were photos Mark and Carmen at the dining table, Mark grinning while Carmen snapped selfies, receipts for groceries and other day-to-day items, even a restaurant bill or two. It all painted a clear picture of their domestic arrangement over the past several weeks, the direct overlap with my absence. One photo in particular made my stomach churn. Mark on our couch, feet propped up, Carmen's head on his shoulder. He wore an expression of relaxed contentment, as if life was perfect. Kelsey let out a low hiss. "That's just." I don't even have words. She tossed the photo aside. So are you going to blow up on him? Or do you actually want to reconcile? I stared at the scattered pieces of evidence. A swirl of conflicting emotions threatened to drown me. On one hand, a part of me ached for the love we once had, the dreams and plans we made together. On the other hand, the fury burned bright, urging me to make him pay for this betrayal, to let him feel the loneliness and heartbreak I endured. Carmen's folder gave me ammunition, and I wasn't sure yet how I wanted to use it. In the following days, Mark texted and called relentlessly, leaving voicemails telling me he was sorry, that he wanted me to come home, that he'd do anything to fix this. I ignored him. I needed time. I needed to think without being swayed by his voice. Meanwhile, I quietly visited a lawyer, just to understand my options. The lawyer, Miss Powell, was a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s. She listened to my story with a calm, methodical detachment, occasionally jotting notes. At the very least, she said, leaning back in her chair, you have grounds for emotional distress. Not necessarily infidelity in the legal sense, unless you can prove physical affair, but it's enough to show you've been subjected to unreasonable behavior by your spouse. She glanced at the photos I'd brought. If you wanted to pursue a divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences, you could definitely use these to support your case. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I didn't know if I was ready to end the marriage, but it helped to understand the legal ramifications, to know I wasn't trapped. Miss Powell also advised me to gather financial records, to watch if Mark did anything suspicious with our joint accounts. Just in case, she said gently, it's better to be prepared. Walking out of that law office, I felt a flicker of empowerment. Knowledge was power. If Mark thought he could juggle me and Carmen without consequences, he was wrong. A revenge story had already begun writing itself in my mind. The question was how far I wanted to go. Did I want a scorched earth approach, or did I want something more measured? One evening, as I was pacing Kelsey's living room, Mark's name lit up my phone again. I answered this time, heart pounding. What? I snapped, not bothering with pleasantries. He sighed into the phone, relief evident. Thank God you picked up. I've been going crazy. Good, I replied coldly. Maybe now you know how I felt. Crazy and alone. He paused, seemingly unsure of how to proceed. I deserve that. Look, can we meet somewhere? Just talk? I promise I'll answer any questions you have. Despite my anger, I agreed to meet him. We chose a neutral location, a small park near the river. Evening sunlight bathed the area in gold. Kids were running around. A few couples strolled along the walkway. I waited by a bench. When Mark arrived, he looked tired, like he hadn't slept well in days. He stopped a few steps away, as if unsure if he could approach. How are you? He asked softly. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said, I'm still mad as hell. He winced, nodding. I know, and I get it. Listen, I need you to know that I never wanted to replace you. I never stopped loving you. I was just lonely, and I made a really, really stupid decision. Carmen was just there. Yeah, I responded, voice flat. There, in our home, in our bed. He cut in desperately. I swear we didn't share the bed. She had the guest room. I scoffed. Guest room? She had half my closet, Mark. Don't insult me by pretending it was innocent. He ran his hand through his hair, looking like a man cornered. I know. I'm sorry. If I could go back, I wouldn't have done any of it. But I can't change the past. I can only try to make things right. He stepped closer, voice trembling. I want you back. I'll do anything. I love you. Those words, once capable of warming me from the inside, now felt hollow, tarnished by betrayal. I need to know why, I demanded, my anger returning. Why did you think it was okay? Did you think I wouldn't come back? Did you think I wouldn't care? He looked away, tears forming. It wasn't about that. I was depressed. You were gone for so long. I know it was for your career, but it felt like you chose it over me. And Carmen listened to me. She made me laugh. I felt less alone. But it spiraled, turned into something I never meant. I'm not excusing it, just trying to be honest. Pain churned in my gut. Part of me sympathized, remembering how, in the past year, my focus had shifted heavily to my training. But still, it didn't justify what he did. I needed you to support me while I pursued something important. That's part of marriage. And you replaced me. He shook his head, tears now sliding down his cheeks. I know, and I hate myself for it. If you give me another chance, I'll prove how sorry I am. The raw emotion on his face was almost hard to see. For a moment, I thought I might crack. But then I remembered the images of Carmen laughing by his side, the messages about picking up milk because she was staying over yet again, the image of her in my clothes. My resolve hardened. I'm not just going to forgive and forget, I said, each word deliberate. You've betrayed my trust in a way that can't be undone by a simple apology. You say you'll do anything to make it right? Then we'll see if you mean that. His brows furrowed. What do you want me to do? I paused, letting the question linger. I still wasn't certain. Did I want a painful, drawn-out revenge where I exploited the emotional strain he'd caused me? Or did I want to see if he'd truly put in the work to earn my forgiveness? For the moment, I played it cool. First, you need to give me time. Stop texting and calling. Let me breathe. If you try to pressure me, I'll file for divorce. He swallowed, nodding vigorously. Okay. Anything else? You'll pay for the rest of my training expenses, I said, my voice as cold as I could make it. Everything that went on my card, the travel, the extra gear, you cover it. He blinked but didn't protest. Done. I clenched my jaw, arms crossed. And if I do decide to come home, you'd better make sure there's no trace of Carmen in my house. Not a hair, not a magazine, not even a faint smell of her perfume. If I see one thing, I'm gone. He breathed out shakily. I understand. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked away, my head high even though I felt tears threaten. This was just the beginning. He said he'd do anything, but I was nowhere near done making him prove it. Back at Kelsey's, I explained the conversation. She raised an eyebrow. You told him to leave you alone, but you also said if you decide to come home, he needs to clear out Carmen's stuff? I nodded, sinking onto the couch. I'm testing him. If he can follow those instructions without complaint, maybe it'll show he's actually remorseful. If he doesn't, or if he tries to push me, then I know he's not serious. She laughed dryly. That's one way to do it. So, are you actually planning to go back? I stared at the city lights through the window. I don't know yet. But while he's cleaning up the mess, I'll have time to think. I flipped through the photos again, each one stinging like a needle to the heart. And maybe time to plan a little payback. Kelsey tilted her head curiously. What do you mean by that? I gave a mirthless smile. I want him to feel what it's like to be replaced. Maybe not with another man, but with the knowledge that he's not my priority anymore. The idea had been simmering in my mind, the notion that I could devote myself fully to the next phase of my career or personal ambitions. He'd taken for granted that I'd always be there, waiting. Now I wanted him to feel the insecurity, the sense of not being number one in someone's life. Kelsey shrugged. As long as you don't do anything illegal. I laughed softly. A hollow sound. Don't worry. I'm not going to slash his tires or set his car on fire. My mind drifted back to the conversation with Carmen, the knowledge that she'd been half in love with him. That thought made me want to lash out in some dramatic way, but I also realized something crucial. If I stooped to petty or unlawful acts, I'd only jeopardize my own future and potentially ruin my moral high ground. So a more calculated approach was necessary. Over the next couple of weeks, I set about living my life as if Mark didn't exist. I poured myself into the final administrative tasks of my training program. I volunteered for additional specialized classes that might advance my career. I worked out, I attended social gatherings with Kelsey, and I made new connections. Every day, I checked in with Miss Powell, the lawyer, ensuring my financials were protected. Mark, to his credit, kept his word. He didn't call or text. A few times, he'd send me pictures of the house, showing how he'd removed every trace of Carmen's presence, but no message accompanied them except, per your instructions. In a way, it was unsettling. I had expected him to break down my door, to beg me in person again. But he obeyed my rules to a fault. And with each silent day that passed, my anger began to morph into a strange blend of curiosity and an odd emptiness. I'd been so used to that rage fueling me. Now, the emptiness made me question, what do I really want now? Weeks turned into over a month. The holiday season approached, an ordinarily cheerful time that now felt overshadowed by my marital turmoil. Kelsey's loft was decorated in bright colors, while I roamed around with a heavy heart. Her family invited me to their gatherings, but I felt like an intruder despite their kindness. One night, Kelsey coaxed me into going to a holiday party hosted by a mutual friend. She insisted it would be good for me. I dressed up in a sleek navy dress, determined to have a good time. The venue was a rented hall, filled with music, laughter, the clink of glasses. For the first hour or so, I smiled politely, made small talk, tried to ignore the pang of jealousy when I saw couples dancing together, exchanging affectionate glances. Then, out of nowhere, I noticed Mark in the crowd. My heart flipped. He was standing near the drinks table, looking tense, scanning the room. Before I could dart away, he spotted me. Our eyes locked. Slowly, he made his way over, weaving between clusters of chatting guests. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions flood me: anger, longing, hurt, all swirling together. "I didn't know you'd be here," I said stiffly when he reached me. He cleared his throat, tugging at his shirt collar. "I was invited by a friend. I had no idea you'd be here either." We stood there, awkwardly silent as the music swelled around us. Finally, Mark spoke. "You look beautiful." I pursed my lips, fighting the urge to soften. "Thank you," I replied curtly. He shifted, glancing at the dance floor where couples swayed. Can I ask you for a dance?" I nearly laughed at the audacity. "You think I'd want to dance with you?" He winced, nodding slowly. I had to try. His eyes darted around. "How have you been?" The dryness in my voice must have been unmistakable. "Fine." "Busy with my career, enjoying my independence." He exhaled, a slow, pained breath. "I see." Silence stretched between us again, thick enough to slice. My emotions roiled. I hadn't decided what to do about him yet, but seeing him again stirred up memories, both good and bad. Part of me missed the comfort of our marriage, the sense of partnership we once shared. Another part remembered the betrayal, the humiliating images of Carmen playing wife in my absence. Someone bumped Mark from behind, jolting us. He caught himself, then gestured toward a quieter corner. Hesitantly, I followed. The corner offered a little respite from the crowd. "Have you thought about us?" he asked softly. Are you going to come back?" I set my jaw. "I told you I needed time, and you said you'd give me space." He nodded, swallowing. "I know, but I guess seeing you here, it's hard. I miss you." A wave of vulnerability crossed his face, and for a fleeting moment, I recalled the man I'd fallen in love with: kind, supportive, loyal. The man who'd once promised to always stand by me. My heart twisted with a pang of longing, but I remembered all too well how easily that loyalty had been abandoned. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You hurt me. Deeply. And I'm not going to pretend everything can go back to normal because you say you're sorry. I need more than that. I need a real reason to believe you'll never betray my trust again." He nodded vigorously. "I can give you that. I can show you." I cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't make promises on the spot. If you mean it, prove it. Until then, we've got nothing else to talk about." He stared, looking like he wanted to say more. Then he just nodded, biting his lip. With that, I pivoted, walking back into the swirl of partygoers. I forced myself to smile and mingle, ignoring the anguished expression I'd left on Mark's face. After that encounter, Mark unexpectedly upped his efforts in a way I hadn't predicted. He contacted Miss Powell, the lawyer, asking her how he could ensure I felt financially secure. She relayed the message to me, noting that he was willing to sign a postnuptial agreement stating that if he ever emotionally or physically cheated, I'd receive a substantial share of our combined assets. He sent me documents showing he was putting the house solely in my name, though. That part wasn't final yet. He was initiating the process. I was both stunned and wary. This level of contrition was unprecedented, but I also knew actions spoke louder than words. Even so, it caught my attention. If he was willing to give up ownership of the house, that was more than a symbolic gesture, it was major. Part of me began to wonder if I'd found the perfect avenue for revenge, letting him sign everything over, ensuring I was protected in every possible way, and then deciding if I still wanted to stay. That might break him more than anything else, ironically. But was that fair, or was it exactly what he deserved? When Miss Powell slid the draft agreement across her desk to me, I read every word carefully. Mark's signatures were in all the right places. My lawyer looked at me pointedly. He's offering you everything short of the moon here. If he breaks your trust again, you'll be more than set for life. I traced my finger over the text. I see that. My pulse raced. This was the moment, if I signed, I'd have a safety net that guaranteed if Mark ever pulled another stunt, I could walk away without a single financial worry. In essence, I'd hold an axe over his head for the remainder of our marriage, if I stayed. Miss Powell gave me a gentle look. What do you want to do? I exhaled, setting the papers down. I want to hear from Mark in person about all this. I need to see his face when he tells me he's willing to do it. That evening, I arranged a meeting in a private conference room at Miss Powell's firm. Mark showed up in a suit, looking as though he hadn't seen a good night's sleep in months. We sat across from each other at a large wooden table. Miss Powell stayed to moderate, but otherwise gave us privacy. I tapped the documents. So you're serious about all of this? He nodded without hesitation. Yes, I want to give you every assurance I can. I betrayed your trust, and if you give me another chance, I need to be certain you know how sincere I am. His voice shook slightly. If this is what it takes, I'm ready. You realize this means if you stray even once, I can take the house, the savings, everything. His eyes locked on mine. I realize that, and I'm still willing to sign. I narrowed my gaze, searching for any sign of deception or reluctance. Instead, I found desperation and regret. After a pause, I signed the documents. My heart thudded as Miss Powell notarized everything, and just like that, the dynamic of our marriage changed irrevocably. The tension in the room was thick. Mark rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at me. You're not coming home yet, are you? He asked. I shook my head. Not yet. I still need time. But I appreciate the gesture. He gave a weak smile. I'll wait. Standing up, I collected the papers and left, not allowing any further conversation. My thoughts were a whirlpool of conflicting emotions, satisfaction at having this new power, sorrow for what our relationship had become, and a hint of curiosity about how far Mark would go to earn his redemption. A few days after we signed the postnup, I received an unexpected call from Carmen. My stomach twisted as I picked up. Hello? Her voice trembled. I got a letter today from an anonymous sender. It said I should keep my mouth shut about what really happened, or else there'd be consequences. My brow furrowed. What? You think it's from Mark? She hesitated. I don't know. It could be from him, or from someone else who's trying to protect him or you. It was typed out, no return address. It basically threatened to ruin me at our workplace if I stirred up any trouble. A cold chill ran through me. Mark hadn't mentioned anything like this, and it didn't fit the remorseful behavior he'd shown. Could it be someone else meddling, or was Mark operating out of desperation? Well, did you talk to Mark? I asked sharply. She sighed. He denies sending anything. And I kind of believe him, but I'm still freaked out. You're the only other person who knows the details as well as he does. Are you trying to intimidate me into shutting up? My jaw dropped. Are you serious? Why would I do that? I already confronted you. I'm not planning to threaten you. We spoke for a few more minutes, both baffled and concerned. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, phone in hand, feeling a storm of unease. Was Mark lying again, or was someone else interfering? If there was a third party involved, what was their motive? I decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I carefully probed Mark about any unusual activity. I also asked around discreetly among acquaintances, trying to see if there was any rumor about Carmen causing trouble. Nothing concrete emerged, just vague gossip at their workplace that she'd been living with him while I was away, which apparently had sparked rumors. But no one admitted to sending any threats. Part of me wondered if Carmen had made the letter up to gain sympathy or manipulate me further, but her fearful tone on the phone seemed genuine. As I tried to unravel the mystery, I grew more convinced that someone, somewhere, wanted to keep her quiet. Perhaps they feared that if Carmen changed her story or sued Mark or me for harassment, it would cause a bigger scandal. The question was, who had a stake in this affair beyond Mark and me? One night, I got my answer. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Watch your back. Stop digging or else." Adrenaline surged through me. I immediately tried calling back, but there was no answer. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Whoever this was, they knew I was investigating. Could it be Mark, after all, pulling some twisted scheme to scare me from learning something new? Or had Carmen lied and was now flipping the script on me? I confided in Kelsey, who insisted I go to the police. But I hesitated, not wanting to escalate the situation unless I had more proof. Instead, I sent a screenshot of the text to Miss Powell just to keep a record of it. I also found myself texting Mark despite my earlier vow to keep distance to ask if he knew anything about these threats. He replied almost immediately, sounding alarmed. "No, I swear I have nothing to do with that." "Are you okay?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding with frustration. My revenge story had taken an unexpected twist. Instead of a straightforward betrayal, there was now a shadowy figure playing puppet master. The revelation came suddenly in the form of an unprompted confession from Carmen. She called me again, late at night, her voice shaking. "I lied," she blurted. "The letter wasn't anonymous. It was from my ex, Aaron. He's been trying to blackmail me ever since I moved out of our place last year. He hates Mark because he blames him for the breakup. When you confronted me and I mentioned the letter, I was panicking. I thought Aaron might be playing both sides, threatening you too." I let out an exasperated sigh. "So, you've been dragging me through a paranoid loop because of your own drama with your ex? Why didn't you just tell me?" She sobbed on the other end. "I'm sorry, I was so scared. Aaron's unhinged. He threatened Mark before, saying he'd ruin him. I think the text you got might be from him. He found out you were looking into who sent me that letter, and now he's coming for you." Sickness rose in my throat. The last thing I needed was some vengeful ex meddling in my life. "Then you'd better handle it," I said sharply, "because I have no intention of being dragged any further into your personal mess." We ended the call, but I couldn't sleep that night. My mind reeled with the absurdity of it all. Mark's emotional affair with Carmen, Carmen's manipulative ex, mysterious threats. It felt like a web of drama far beyond what I'd signed up for. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of everything, to file for divorce and leave them all to their chaos. Another part of me still felt tethered to Mark, tied to the hope that he might truly redeem himself. A few days later, I was leaving Kelsey's building when a man stepped out from behind a pillar, blocking my path. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head. The look in his eyes was cold, menacing. "You must be Jade," he said, voice low. "Carmen's been talking about you." My heart hammered, but I mustered my best glare. "Who are you?" he smirked. "Aaron. Heard you've been nosing around, trying to figure out who threatened Carmen." Anger flared, overriding my fear. "You're the one making threats?" He shrugged casually, as though discussing the weather. "Carmen didn't respect boundaries, and neither did Mark. He took her from me, and now I've got to make sure they both pay. If you get in the way, I'll make sure you regret it." The air turned electric with tension. "You're delusional," I spat. "Carmen left you because she wanted to, not because Mark stole her. You're just looking for someone else to blame." Something dark flitted across his face. Watch yourself, he hissed, stepping closer until his stale breath fanned my face. I've taken down bigger fish than you. Mark's next, and you'll fall with him if you don't back off. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. I was tempted to lash out physically, my training had given me the tools, but I also knew assault wouldn't help my cause. Instead, I stood my ground, glare unwavering. You don't scare me. His lips curled in a sneer. Then, with a final threatening glower, he turned and stalked away. My knees felt wobbly, but I maintained my posture until he disappeared from sight. Only then did I let out the shaky breath I'd been holding. Returning to Kelsey's loft, I immediately called the police. Aaron's confrontation had crossed the line into harassment, possibly stalking. They took my statement, but without direct evidence of a crime beyond vague threats. They said it would be difficult to press charges. Still, they noted the complaint in case there were further incidents. I also updated Miss Powell, who recommended a restraining order if it escalated. Oddly enough, this threat forced Mark and me back into communication. When I told him about Aaron, he sounded genuinely scared for me. I'll do anything you need, he insisted over the phone. If you want protection, I'll stay with you. If you want me to go to the police, I will. I was touched by his concern, albeit wary of mixing him into my personal space again. In the end, I told him I could handle it. But the situation with Aaron was a ticking time bomb. Carmen had moved out of Mark's place, but she was still around the office, and Aaron still considered Mark a target for revenge. It struck me as ironic that Mark had moved Carmen in for safety and companionship, only to end up entangled in a lethal threat from her unhinged ex. My revenge story had turned into a real-life thriller, one that forced Mark and me onto the same side, if only for the moment. At one point, Carmen reached out, her voice frantic. Aaron's threatened to come to the office. He might have a weapon. I don't know what to do. She sounded on the verge of tears. Despite my lingering dislike for her, I couldn't ignore the potential danger. Call security. Call the police. Let them know you have reason to believe he might show up. I paused, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. And for the record, Carmen, you need to cut off all contact with him. Stop antagonizing him. Stop giving him any reason to harass you. She stammered agreement, and I hung up. My life had twisted into a nightmare. As the situation escalated, Mark tried to keep me updated. Each day, we heard fresh rumors of Aaron's threatening behavior. Carmen filed a police report, but nothing definitive had happened yet. It was like standing under a gathering storm, bracing for the thunder. I'll never forget the night the storm finally broke. Mark and I were at my lawyer's office, discussing final touches on some property details. Yes, he was truly signing over the house to me, ensuring my security. It was late, the building mostly empty. Suddenly, the door burst open. Aaron stood there, a wild look in his eyes. My blood ran cold. He must have followed Mark, or maybe he'd found out about the meeting from Carmen. Either way, seeing him there sent a jolt of fear through my chest. In his hand, he gripped a small handgun, muzzle pointed at the ceiling. Muzzle, Powell gasped, stepping back. Sir, you can't be in here, he ignored her, his gaze locked on Mark. You ruined my life, he snarled, voice trembling with rage. You took Carmen away from me. You turned her against me. Mark raised his hand slowly. Aaron, calm down. It doesn't have to be like this. Aaron let out a bitter laugh. Calm down? You humiliated me. You're going to pay. I felt my training instincts kick in, adrenaline flooding my system. I subtly stepped to the side, putting distance between myself and Miss Powell. My mind raced, scanning for potential ways to disarm him, but I had to be sure not to provoke him into firing. Carefully, the first tried to keep my voice steady. Aaron, think about what you're doing. If you hurt anyone here, you'll end up in prison. He whipped his gaze toward me, eyes wild. Shut up. You're just as bad, meddling in things that don't concern you. Mark took a step forward, drawing Aaron's attention away from me. This is between you and me, right? Leave Jade out of it, Aaron's hand shook. Between you and me? Fine. Let's settle it. The moment his focus narrowed on Mark, the first made my move. With practiced fluidity, I lunged, grabbing Aaron's wrist and twisting it just enough to jar the gun loose. The weapon clattered to the floor. I kicked it out of reach, ignoring the pain in my side as Aaron lashed out. Mark dived to help, grappling with Aaron's other arm. Miss Powell screamed, scrambling for her phone to call the police. A chaotic struggle ensued. Despite his rage, Aaron wasn't well trained. Mark and I managed to pin him to the floor. My heart thundered in my chest as Miss Powell informed the dispatcher of an armed intruder. We held Aaron down until the police arrived, sirens wailing in the distance. When they burst into the office, guns drawn, we finally released him into their custody. I backed away, trembling from the surge of adrenaline. Mark stood beside me, breathing hard, a bruise forming on his cheek. Aaron was taken away in handcuffs, cursing our names. Miss Powell sat in a chair, trying to steady her nerves, the phone still clutched in her hand. Through it all, Mark and I exchanged a glance of profound relief and disbelief. We'd just survived a near tragedy together. The days following Aaron's arrest felt surreal. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, among other offenses. Carmen, shaken to the core, finally sought a restraining order against him. The police took statements from all of us. Mark was lauded by some for helping subdue the intruder, though he made sure to give me the credit for disarming him. It was a strange experience, receiving praise for a heroic act that sprang from a personal mess none of us had asked for. In the wake of the crisis, Mark and I found ourselves leaning on each other more than expected. Despite our fractured relationship, nearly losing our lives to Aaron's outburst put things into a sobering perspective. When we talked, there was a tenderness, a raw vulnerability. He confessed his gratitude, his guilt over having put me in harm's way by bringing Carmen into our lives in the first place. "I never wanted any of this," he said one afternoon at a cafe near Miss Powell's office. The trial for Aaron was pending, and we'd just come from giving further statements. "I wish I could turn back time." I studied him over the rim of my coffee mug. "We can't change the past, Mark, but maybe we can learn from it." He nodded, hands wrapped around his cup as though seeking warmth. "Does that mean you might forgive me?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "It means that I see how far you've gone to earn my trust back. The postnup, transferring the house, your willingness to accept blame. It all means something. But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. There's a long way to go." He exhaled, relief and anxiety mingling on his face. "I'll do whatever it takes." In that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could continue the path of cold, calculated revenge, using my newfound leverage to keep Mark perpetually on edge. Or I could try to build something new with him, a marriage stripped of illusions but reinforced by hard-won honesty. After all, he had, in a very real sense, offered me everything if he ever strayed again. I had the power now. Revenge in its purest form might be having the power to destroy him, but choosing not to making him live with the consequences of earning back my trust, day by day. In the weeks that followed, I made the decision to move back home on a trial basis. The day I returned, I found the house completely rearranged. Gone were any lingering remnants of Carmen's presence. The bed, the closets, the living spaces, all meticulously restored to something that felt like my own. Mark had even put fresh flowers on the dining table, a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. That first night, I slept in our bedroom while Mark took the couch without complaint. I wasn't ready for physical closeness yet. We tiptoed around each other like wary strangers, but also with a certain tenderness. Over time, we started talking again, truly talking about the issues that had driven a wedge between us. My demanding training schedule, his loneliness, the breakdown of communication. We attended counseling sessions, digging into painful truths. Day by day, a fragile sense of hope took root. Mark respected my boundaries and gave me space. Whenever insecurities flared, we addressed them instead of letting them fester. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I was making a mistake, but the alternative, living with bitterness forever, felt more like a prison than giving him a chance to prove himself. As for Carmen, she distanced herself completely from Mark, focusing on dealing with the legal fallout of Erin's arrest. The last I heard, she was moving to another city to start fresh. I didn't wish her ill, but I also didn't care to maintain any contact. She'd been a catalyst for this chaos, though ultimately, Mark was the one who betrayed me. Meanwhile, Erin remained in custody, awaiting trial. A part of me shuddered to think of how dangerously one person's obsession could spiral. It was a somber reminder of how twisted things can become when boundaries and trust are violated. Months passed. My training program ended successfully, and I advanced into a new role that required less constant travel. Mark and I settled into a cautious routine, somewhere between old familiarity and new uncertainty. The postnup remained in effect, a silent testament that if he ever crossed the line again, I could walk away with everything. In a paradoxical way, that gave me a sense of security. I no longer feared that I was stuck with someone who might betray me again without consequences. One sunny afternoon, I found myself sitting on our back porch, sipping iced tea. Mark came out quietly, taking a seat beside me. We watched the trees sway in the breeze. I felt the warmth of the sun on my face, thinking about how far we'd come since that dreadful day. I discovered those damning text messages. He cleared his throat. I want to thank you, he said softly, for giving me another chance when you could have taken me for everything I'm worth. I smiled faintly. I guess that would have been the classic revenge scenario, huh? Leaving you high and dry, humiliated. But I realized that what I really wanted wasn't to see you destroyed. I just wanted you to understand the depth of what you'd done. And now I think you do. He reached for my hand, hesitated, then gently intertwined his fingers with mine when I didn't pull away. For the first time in what felt like ages, I welcomed his touch without resentment. We sat there, hand in hand, letting the quiet speak for us. In the end, my revenge turned out to be something less dramatic than a scorched earth plan. It was, instead, a slow burn of accountability and hard-earned redemption. By forcing Mark to confront the consequences of his actions, by taking the power into my own hands legally and emotionally, I found a sense of closure and growth. And by choosing to let him prove his remorse rather than simply punishing him forever, I found a path back to something resembling love. The nightmares of Carmen walking around my house in my clothes, or Erin's wild eyes brandishing a gun, began to fade. In their place grew a cautious optimism. We were building something new, fragile, yes, but more honest. Where it would lead in the long run, no one could say for sure. But for now, in this warm afternoon glow, I felt a sense of peace. And that, in its own unexpected way, was a happy ending.